Hello folks, this is Alistair Postquin. You can find my books and patterns, etc. on my website at double-knitting.com. So thanks for tuning in. Almost 3 months ago I did a live stream that talked about the parallax patterns and the future of metapixel knitting, but I don't really feel like I did justice to that, and I wanted to talk a little bit more about it and really give it another shot. So this is take 2 on metapixel knitting, and I hope you enjoy it. So first of all, to coin a term, I call this particular style metapixel knitting, in particular metapixel double knitting, but the style could be expressed in stranded knitting or in tarsha, but I prefer to use double knitting as I do in everything else. So I'll get to the reason for the name in just a minute, but let me first say that it's inspired by the op art movement of the 1960s and overshot weaving. So what's in the name? Well, if you think about the individual squares in a knitting chart as pixels, a computer term that's short for picture element, in that they are small colored elements that go together to become a picture, the term meta implies a kind of recursion, so a metapixel is a pixel made up of other pixels. So let's explore this a little bit. Here's a pixel grid. This is a 9x9 pixel grid. It's just a chart grid. You could put any kind of chart in here. Each pixel is identical to all the others. Each one is a square. Each one is precisely 1 pixel wide by 1 pixel high. So what would happen if we could change the dimensions of a pixel? The limitation is, since we're still working within a grid, that changing the height of a pixel actually changes the height of all pixels in that row, and changing the width of a pixel changes the width of all pixels in that column. So here's a 9x9 metapixel grid transformation. As you can see, there are the same number of metapixels here as there were in the previous pixel grid. But due to the transformation, the size of the resulting square is considerably larger. Just to drive that home, here's the same metapixel grid overlaid with a new set of pixels showing the precise dimensions of the new grid. As you can now easily see, the transformation is based on the numerical progression 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1 in both the x and y axis. So now that we have a pixel and metapixel grid set up, what can we do with them? The most obvious choice is a simple checkerboard. Applied to the metapixel, so yeah, there's the checkerboard. Applied to the metapixel grid, you can see the transformation even more clearly. The important thing here is that every metapixel must consist solely of pixels of the same color. In a checkerboard configuration, we ensure that no 2 metapixels of the same color ever touch each other, at least edge to edge. So this concept formed the basis for my first 3 parallax patterns, version 1.0, 0.5, or excuse me, version 0.1, 0.5, and 1.0. 1.0 actually was the first one that I did, but in order of complexity, there's 0.1, 0.5, and 1.0. By the way, I give them all version numbers rather than names, because they're all derivatives of each other, and I just don't want to have to come up with a brand new name every single time. So I don't have 0.1 anymore. Here's a picture of it in a yarn shop. It's just a seat cushion done in super bulky yarn, and it's kind of a this is about as much super bulky double knitting as I ever wanted to do. But it's got this kind of dimensionality that makes it look cushier than it really is, but to be honest, it's actually quite cushy anyway, because it is a double knit piece made in super bulky yarn. The other pieces that I have to show are actually physically here. So I'm actually going to show you 0.5. These are things, by the way, that if you've been keeping track of my story over the past 4 months, these are all things that were rescued from the fire. So I didn't have them last time I did this talk, and so now I've actually got them. So this is Parallax 0.5. It's done in a yarn that's no longer produced by Bijou Basin Ranch, but it's a sport weight. Well, they call it a sport weight. It really works closer to DK, frankly. So, so this is Parallax 0.5. And as you can see, this focuses on the compression points. These points where the metapixels get smaller. This is Parallax 1.0, and this is done in County. The long color gradients give that away, and also it's in fingering weight yarn, which is what County is, and it's actually all done in twisted stitches, because this is a product of a time in my creative career when I was doing a lot of work in twisted stitches. It's not necessary to do it in twisted stitches, by the way. This is focusing on the expansion points. As you can see, the compression point would be, if we continued the pattern out here, the compression point would be here. This is an expansion point where you can see the squares getting larger. And the last one I want to show right now is Parallax 2.0, which I really wanted to show both the expansion and compression points in the same scarf, but that wasn't really practical and still make it approximately scarf width. So what I did is I sent it all on the bias by doing an increase on one edge and decrease on the other every other row, and that gives me this the visibility of both the expansion and compression points. So now you've probably noticed that I have a penchant for multicolor double knitting. So here's what happens if you take that pixel grid again and fill it in with a simple 3-color pattern instead of 2 colors. The metapixel transformation that we'll use is the same. But you can see that the strength of multicolor metapixel knitting is that you appear to be limited to only checkerboards in 2-color metapixel knitting, assuming that you stick to the rule where no 2 metapixels of the same color should be right next to each other. But in 3 or more colors, you actually have the choice of doing some really fascinating things with the color work. You can make the colors. You can put the colors wherever you want. You can draw pictures with them. You can get away with a lot more. And actually, here's a different 3-color configuration in the pixel grid, and how it expresses in the same metapixel grid. So I've got 2 completely different pixel grids, 2 completely different metapixel grids, but it's the same metapixel grid. It's the same 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 1, 1 grid. So with that, I have Parallax 3.0. So this is Parallax 3.0, and as you can see, it's done in 3-color ways. County, and County being long color gradient means that the colors tend to shift and mix as you go, and you don't really know what you're going to get until you get there, which makes it a really fun knit and keeps the interest up throughout the piece. Just waiting to see what it's going to be next. I've got also Parallax 3.5, Now, this one really shows off what I'm trying to show here in these metapixel transformations with 3 colors. The fact that 3.0 focused on the compression points is very much like 0.5. 3.5 focuses on the expansion points, but it also does some interesting things with the chart. As you can see, it alternates between 2 radically different expressions of color in the same metapixel grid. So this is just a repeat of the same metapixel grid over and over and over again, but every other time it is shown, it is going to switch from one pattern to the next, and they actually sort of bleed into each other a little bit. It's also 10 feet long because I just loved working this thing so much that I couldn't stop. And I'm very, very happy that this was saved. This was one of the pieces that got damaged, but not so badly damaged that I couldn't rescue it. So there we go. So now let's think about the future of metapixel knitting. I have been thinking about overshot weaving, and overshot weaving achieves the same kind of design flexibility that multicolor metapixel knitting achieves with only 2 colors. So let's take a different pixel grid. This is, the same pixel grid, but let's take a different pattern in the pixel grid. As you can see here, I'm breaking one of those little rules. It's not an important rule, but it gives me that warp checkerboard thing that op art is based on. So, or that particular type of op art is based on. So here you can see I'm just using the chart the same way I use it for any other knitting chart. I've made a little motif, and I'm not using the rule where the where 2 pixels of the same color must not be next to each other. So in this case, you can see that that happens frequently. So if I take this and apply it to the same metapixel grid, I get this. And if I then want to take this and modify it, I can rotate the pixel grid. So I'm rotating it as if it were around a cylinder. I'm taking a column off of the edge and sticking it to the other edge, and repeating that 3 times. So if I then take this and map it into the same metapixel grid, I get something quite different. Now, this is one of those things that I really need I need a piece of software that helps me do this. It's something that I've been thinking about commissioning someone to do for years, really, since I started working on this concept, actually before I did Double or Nothing, which came out in 2016. Really, I started working on it in 2014. So it's been 6+ years since the very first Parallax patterns were conceived of, and it occurred to me that the best way for me to figure this out was not to have to manually chart each one, but to see if I could either write or have written a program. I'm not a programmer. I can probably figure out some way of doing this via macros in Excel, but I think that having a program to do this would be even better. Regardless, warped motifs are not necessarily going to look all that good. I'm not really convinced this one looks all that good, but it's a good illustration of what I'm doing, or what you can do with it. Here, what I've done here is I've just taken the grid and I've shifted it so that it's configured the same way as this grid was. But now you can see the whole motif in the sort of squashed form that it has become. So I'm not the only person working in metapixels, although really I'm probably the only one talking about it in these terms. As you can see here, this is Julia Farwell Clay's winter traveler sweater, and I was really fascinated with this when I saw her wearing it at Rhinebeck some years ago. And you can see that it's not warped. It's not a warped grid. It's simply enlarged, but it's enlarged without refining it. So you take this classic Scandinavian snowflake that's usually seen in bands of fair isle knitting or stranded knitting in much smaller form. And what she's done here is she's taken each pixel in that Scandinavian snowflake and made it a metapixel of, I'm not sure if it's 3x3 or 4x4. I have to zoom in on that. And then just made it into this giant motif on the sweater. So this could have been smoothed out, but as it was not smoothed out, it becomes this sort of pixelated view, and so it earns the name Metapixel in my book. So for my part, in terms of how I'm looking to go forward into the future of metapixel knitting, I'm returning to overshot weaving. I'm looking at overshot weaving because I love the idea of breaking that rule and getting away from pure checkerboards. And so this is actually one of the only pieces that I have, only pieces of fabric from my childhood that I still have. It isn't overshot woven, actually. It's something else, but it is woven, and it's using a, or I don't believe it's overshot woven. It is a more dense weave than overshot usually is. Regardless, it uses an overshot weaving pattern, and so it's something very similar. And as you can see, it's sort of not just sticking to the pattern itself, which is usually all over, but also stretching it out and spacing it out in interesting ways. So this was actually stored off-site, so it wasn't something actually rescued from the fire. I just had a few pieces stored in a cedar chest, and this is one of them. So when I talked about this during the last live stream, when I was talking about the parallax patterns, I said somebody gave me some yarn. A follower named Cindy sent me a couple balls of county that she wasn't sure what she wanted to do with when she learned that I'd lost my stash in a fire. She sent me a couple balls of county, as well as a few other things. And Cindy, if you're watching this, thank you very much. I wanted to show you and everyone else what I'm doing with it. Now, I haven't made very much progress. But as you can see, I am taking that pattern and knitting it, or knitting pieces of it. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do from here on. Obviously, I'm going to at least complete the first repeat, but am I going to keep going on with the repeats, or am I going to alternate repeats with this 111-333 ribbing thing? Not really ribbing, but mock ribbing, I suppose you'd consider it, because it's really just a graphic element that I often use to extend the bottom of a scarf. It looks like fringe, but it's really just a graphical thing. So anyway, I'm probably going to repeat that somewhere else in the piece, whether I'm going to repeat it regularly or just like in the middle or something. We'll see. But yeah, it's one of the many things that I'm looking to do in future knitting. This is it's just a 2-color piece. There's nothing terribly unusual about it. It's just following a chart, and it's really kind of a neat piece, and I hope people will enjoy it. It's definitely an expansion of the Parallax series, although I don't know if I'm going to actually give it the Parallax name. We'll see. So I hope this has been enlightening for you. You're welcome to visit my website at double-knitting.com, and maybe buy the Parallax pattern, Parallax collection. I do actually have Parallax 0.5 as a standalone pattern on Ravelry because it was the first to come out. The Parallax collection is, of course, printed, and if you get the printed copy from my website, you'll get a free PDF download, or you can just save bookshelf space and money and get the digital version. So thanks for watching, and tune in again on Friday, October 2nd. I am off a week this week. It was supposed to have been last week. I'm off a week, and due to a death in the family, I just wasn't able to put this together. And so I'm now going to be on another 2-week schedule starting today. So Friday, October 2nd, 11 a.m., right here on my Facebook page. And I'm going to be talking about the genesis of off-the-grid double knitting. And if you're not sure what that means, tune in and find out. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a good rest of your weekend.